Oh, look at the ears. Oh,
You come as Leonard Nimoy.
yeah.
No, it's Prince Charles.
What on earth? The Pip and Jane drama?
Are you going for a comic effect now?
Yes, it's because he says, "Oh, look at the ears." And
Is it
there's
the
a comment.
BFG?
Oh, I said I wasn't going to do cosplay this time around.
I'm not sure you have. Hello and welcome back. Welcome back to Talking About. Yeah, we've done all the old stuff. We are done with that. You can burn it, junk it. We have moved on, and we are now going to be taking on the new stuff, which is also sort of old stuff because it's sort of old. It's old. I am Paul or P-Bal, and I am joined as ever by.
Hello, it's James.
And hello, it's Jason.
Hey, I mean it's almost the age of a legally drinking child now, isn't it?
I know, it's 17 years, isn't it?
Wow, it is unbelievable to think it's that long. It's honestly, it makes me feel a lot older than I already am.
I mean, I was like 4. I was in primary school when this started off. Incredible.
This is what it felt like for Jason, being able to remember when the first series aired live on TV, and now we can remember when it first aired. It's brilliant.
Oh, I am so looking forward to hearing all your childhood stories around it then, James, because I'm sure you were quite young at the time.
I was.
What are memories? Okay, so the first story is Doctor Who and the Rose. Now, again, it's a good litmus test, isn't it, for how good a Doctor Who title is, as to whether you could put Doctor Who and the front. Doctor Who and the Rose. I'm not sure it works. But anyway, which one of you lovely ladies has an introductory speech for this? Is it the BFG or the B?
I don't mind. Jason, do you have anything prepared?
I don't have anything prepared, so I am happy, James, for you to take, because I want to see more of your cosplay needs to be showcased and brought to the fore here.
It's the regeneration. You never know what you're going to get, do you? It's the big ears. So we are at the beginning of a brand new sort of era of Doctor Who, and we start with Rose, quite literally the character, but also that's the name of the episode. And new Doctor, new show. I mean, everything's new, and we really see everything through Rose's eyes. And the adventure sort of starts with Rose in just her everyday life, working at a department store, and she happens to stumble across the Doctor, who's already mid-adventure, and what you start to sort of get in this episode and in later episodes is this slow introduction to Doctor Who and the Doctor Who history, because this is a sort of like, oh, I'm the Doctor, by the way, what's your name? Rose, run for your life. And then we slowly, throughout this series, get the build up of the rest of the history that we've reviewed in our other reviews. You sort of start to feel that out. But this is a real sort of jumping on point for anyone who's never really watched Doctor Who. You don't need to know a great deal about it to get involved in this story, because it's all through Rose's engagement with the Doctor, and the sort of questions like, why do you have a northern accent? All these sort of things. They're all, quite accessible, if you like, to a brand new audience.
Yes, I agree. It really is a setting up of what's to come, isn't it? You start off with it all looks it doesn't look, I can remember this actually, it didn't really look like Doctor Who, and I was slightly taken aback to start with. It was kind of all set in the sort of what you class as the modern day, but it really actually worked quite well. And the art of Russell T Davies is in the way that I think he sets the story up and has that ability to take these characters and just run with them, really. And everybody had preconceptions about how this was going to look when it was announced that Doctor Who was going to come back. And I think it took a lot of people by surprise. And going back and rewatching these, I think it's going to be a really interesting exercise, because some of these I haven't watched probably since the first airing. And it still feels quite fresh, even after 17 years for me. And it's kind of, I don't know, I feel very excited about what's to come for Doctor Who, with Russell back at the helm. Actually, looking back at this, I think I can remember being quite excited as we were leading into this, but not quite sure about what we were going to get. So as a series and a season opener, I think they get this one. I think they get this one quite right and gets off to a good start.
So have you not watched season 1 since it went out then?
I have. I've watched it a couple of times since. But this is probably, I mean, let's face it, we've been reviewing classic Doctor Who for the last several years now. And I
don't think we do for the last 17 years, my love.
I haven't watched it. I've probably watched this season over probably 3 times, I would say, in the time. And this has been probably the longest time since I saw it last, and watching it again this time. And what's quite nice going into this, as we're going to review all of these, is quite a number of these I haven't watched for quite some time. So again, it's going to be quite interesting going back and looking at them in retrospect in the way that we are. But I recall that I wasn't entirely at peace with a lot of the with some of the comedy, I suppose, and some of the throwaway elements that we'll probably talk about as we come through this. But looking back now, 17 years later, with perhaps a slightly different lens on it, I can forgive them for some of those things. I think they were just trying something different and something new. And it almost felt like there was a bit of an edge of, we're just making this up a little bit as we go along. We don't really, they obviously knew what they were looking to try and achieve, obviously bring Doctor Who back. But I think they were trying to stretch the format and see what they could do with it and what they could get away with, possibly.
Funny, because I've seen season 1, season 2, season 3, probably a heck of a lot more than progressively the seasons that follow it. Season 4 is probably my point where it's something I've less watched over and over. Season 1, at this point, because this is how old this is now, I recorded on VHS. I've got VHS recordings off air of Rose and End of the World and stuff like that. So it was still put your VHS in and wait for the ident, and then all that sort of stuff. And then the vanilla video the DVDs, we'd have the 3 episodes with the exciting, and then you wait for Christmas, the giant box set. And I think I wouldn't like to think how many times I've sat through. I think the first 2 seasons definitely was something I did relentlessly, I think, in some form or other. It's funny, and I suppose you probably got a lot more to say about Rose than many of the others that follow this. Not in a slight, but because it is the setup. This is the pilot. If you said this is 1 episode and this is the pilot, isn't it? And if this works, go to the season. So I think this is very much how the thing's constructed. But I think the whole thing's very intelligently constructed for the 13 episodes. If this had been Doctor Who's only shot at coming back, it's a cohesive, complete story, and it's structured incredibly well. This is modern day, so you haven't lost 50% of your audience by saying they're wearing bonnets or not interested. You haven't lost 50% of your audience by saying they've all got 7 arms and 2 eyes, cover ear and stuff. You haven't lost it to alien sci-fi, or it's modern day. So there's an instant kind of appeal there, I suppose, and a recognition with the audience. And then obviously does the front, back, and all that sort of stuff later on. I will go on record that I said on Planet Scarra forums, because I said that the when they said who should be the new assistant, I said Billy Paul Piper. I said Billy Piper. They were like, "You're mad." I was like, "Have you seen her in?" It was one of the Chaucers, wasn't it? I think she did. Anyway, there it was. They all said I was wrong, and look at me now. I was right.
And she is
But
brilliant. She is very much, again, going back to what you were just saying about, being modern day. She is the embodiment of modern day, and the way that Russell T Davies sets up the family unit as well. She's living in a flat with her mum. She's got a boyfriend. She's not exactly thrilled with her life, and then she comes across this stranger who puts her in danger straight away, and it challenges her and plays her down, and she sort of stands up for herself. It's all, like you say, it is a pilot, and it just all fits together so nicely. Everything is set up straight away, and then those elements are constantly revisited. The relationship between Rose and her mum and with Mickey is constantly tested throughout the series, and they I don't want to talk too much about other episodes, but there are other episodes that then the relationship is moved a step forward, and then it's discussed again later on in the series. So by the time you get to the end of the series, the relationships have like between her and her mum have strengthened. The relationship between her and Mickey is slightly different, but it's a thread that runs throughout the whole thing and really sets the basis for, I hate to use the term new Who, but revived Who, in the fact that it's a complete piece.
But it does follow remarkably well on from Survival. You could imagine that being Ace's estate. It's the sort of reality behind what they were sort of edging towards. I mean, they only edged towards it, but there's that sort of feel to it. I mean, I would agree. Billy, I think, is instantly very charismatic and on the money, and she pitched completely greatly. I'm not sure now with hindsight about the accent somehow. I don't know if it feels a little bit stage school. I don't remember questioning it at the time, but having had a break from watching sort of, these episodes, when she's all a bit like that, there were moments where I was like, well, now she talks like this when she's I know it's different teeth and a different face and all that stuff, but it's just funny because she does have a bit of a call blimey governor element every now and then. I'm thinking, I'm not sure that sounds a little bit odd now, but is that unkind?
No, not at all.
No.
Not at all.
No, and having watched other episodes, I think there are other moments where the accent is just a little bit, oh, okay, we've gone really Cockney now. It's
New Age Dodo, isn't it?
It is. It's every week is a different nuanced accent.
Do you remember you used to be able to download an MP3 from the website for your phone of different lines or sound effects from it? My Nokia was much invigorated by the BBC website. Wilson, I've got the lottery money for you is a great quote. I mean, I think. Well, I mean, we can come to Christopher in a moment, but what I'm going to slightly divert on, because it is sort of the burning issue at the heart of this, is I think it's a really great pilot, but a pretty bad story as a result, because it doesn't make a lot. It's like a sort of those paint me color books. It's brush strokes everywhere, so that you get a semblance that there are aliens and Doctor Who and TARDIS and time travel, all this stuff. But the actual story at the heart of it is a little bit like,
I think when we come on,
I don't know why the Autons are taking over Wilson's lottery money, or
I think when we come to view other series and first episodes, I think that's a kind of theme where the villain doesn't always get necessarily the attention they deserve, because they're trying to set up a new Doctor companion sort of situation. But I mean, on the plus side, we do get to see the Auton shop dummies actually crash through a window in this one. So, not just the sound effect and then people running down the street, we get to actually see it. But it's kind of, because she meets the Doctor mid-adventure, we don't know anything about what's happened previously, what's caused him to be there to blow it up. And so you're kind of you're joining the tail end of an adventure, and the focus is all on Rose. So you only see the bits that Rose sees. So you're kind of at a disadvantage that you're not in the main action until, you know, the next story where she's the companion.
But you can see, I think, why they took the call to use something like the Autons, because you are right. You're setting the mold up. You're setting the story up for where it's going to go. Artistically, they've made quite a number of conscious decisions. We're going to keep the TARDIS as the police box. You know, we're going to keep that theme sort of, you know, fairly much the same. So they are going to have to trade somewhere along the line off the history of the show here, rather than come up with something that's completely brand new for the first one. Autons, it's you're right. We don't have the premise as to why all this is going on, because that's already been happening, I suppose, in the story before we join it. But Autons seem like the right choice because they're holding back the surprise of, you know, some of the older monsters, the classics in particular with the Daleks, until a little bit later on in the season, and you can understand why, because it's building towards that. But to use them, I think, quite right in this case. You're right, though, there's a lot about the story that doesn't make sense from that sort of plot development perspective, though, with them.
But isn't the general story the Autons, isn't it, they're all related to much all the way through, that their planet's been destroyed in the Time War, and so they're looking for somewhere else to invade? I think that's the broader scope of it. The sort of finite details of how they've come to Earth and who's helping them, and basically the bones of Terror of the Autons or Spearhead from Space, those parts are missing from it. And I think the sort of the highlight of that problem for me is the end, where Chris Eccleston, struggling with a throat infection or whatever he's doing, is doing his monologue where he's talking to the nesting consciousness that's not talking back to him. So he's doing his lines and sort of repeating what they were saying to him for the audience at home. You get this kind of awkward sort of monologue of it's a really bad Doctor Who thing. It's like when you can't get a reaction from a monster face because it doesn't move enough. It's the monologue of going, well, don't you tell me that you've got no choice but to invade here, you. And it's kind of like, oh, it needs something answering him to help play along.
I think we're missing the real villain of the piece, though, in this episode, which was Graham Norton, who ended up talking over the. Was it the first scene? They accidentally.
Yeah, when they were down in the worst basement of a department store you ever did see, that looks like it's Cardiff Stadium. But yes, it went on for quite some time, didn't it?
It did. I remember, and it was, you know, first, because there was a big thing happening on BBC that night, wasn't it? And they played the episode, but then someone had accidentally knocked the mic, so you could just hear Graham Norton chatting in the background, and it just seemed to go on forever. You know, it was like people phoning the BBC going, why is Graham Norton talking? Where's Graham Norton in this episode? It's like,
it's all right. Most of us had seen the leaked episode that had already the leaked edit that had been released.
Did you watch the leaked version then?
I didn't.
I didn't watch the leaked version. Did you watch it, Jason, you criminal?
I did indeed watch the leaked version. And I remember the one memory I've got of watching the leaked version was how loud the soundtrack was. And I was sure that was going to get sorted before we watched the actual episode. And then the soundtrack is booming out in just the same way when you see the live episode.
Did you try turning the volume down on your telly, dear?
I mean,
my big trumpet earphone out as well.
I mean, so he watched the leaked version of Rose and Rose multiple times, yet never watched K9 and Company, folks.
Oh no, we got.
That's because it didn't leak beforehand. If it had leaked, he would have watched it.
If it had leaked, I'd have been all over it. I'm never going to live K9 and Company down, am I?
No, not at all.
Oh no, your ears are wobbling when you do that. Don't do that.
Anyway, yes, that was a big. I can remember that being a big drama about Rose leaking, so to speak. The other thing, okay, Chris Eccleston is interesting because I think he's actually very good and he's very quick.
Yeah.
Because the gist is meant to be that he's just regenerated, isn't he? Because that's why he doesn't know that he's got comedy ears and a headband. That's why he doesn't know. But so he can't have been, you know, around very long and all that sort of stuff. But the thing I find with Chris, and again, it's not just an old misery. I am an old misery guy. Anyway, I find he can do the angry and he can do the drama. I cringe a little bit inside when he tries the comedy or the light. I don't find him. He seems ill at comfort doing the comedy moments or the light stuff. He doesn't do buffoonery or fun.
I think the bit where he's with Jackie and Jackie's there going, oh, you know, I'm in my dressing gown and anything could happen, and he just goes, no. I think that where it's deadpan, I think.
Do you like that?
Oh my God, I like that. But then I think later on there are moments where he makes little quips and jokes, and when he flicks through the magazine and go, oh, he's alien and she's an alien, he's gay and things like that. I just, there's a lot of humor in this episode, and some of it may not be geared towards older gentlemen. It's probably geared towards the younger audience, you know, and certainly we'll probably talk about that in other episodes as well, where it's quite very juvenile humor. I think you're right. I think he does the darkness and later on the Broken Doctor so well. I think the lightness, the humor, I think is a bit patchy for me.
He almost feels very awkward. I agree. I think there's an awkwardness that he's either trying to play that in that way, or it's just coming across because he's not that comfortable. And I think we've subsequently read since that quite early on, it feels like there may have been artistic differences between Chris and the production team that might have led to tensions on set, I understand.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a difficult thing to sort of pull out on things like that, because if you went back through the whole history of Doctor Who, there's always going to be a background thing. You know, Hartnell had a whole year of not liking John Wiles, and you know, this. I think it's nothing new to say that you wouldn't like producer or the director or a guest star. I think you could sort of go back through quite a few of them.
Do you feel Chris might have, when the concept of the program was sold to him, do you think he maybe it wasn't sold in necessarily the way it ended up, that he had to play it, or that it ended up being produced potentially?
I don't know. I mean, firstly, there's a huge thing that this was the revival of the show, and if they'd got the wrong person playing the Doctor, it could have all ended in, you know, disaster. So I think in that respect, and this is only the first episode, but he does hit the ground running, and he is the Doctor. He embodies whatever it is that the Doctor embodies in this episode, and then you start to see different sides of him as you go through the series. I think that having listened to some of the audios that he's done now, because he's come back to the character, he genuinely loves playing the Doctor. I think that his time on the show, though, in front of the cameras, probably wasn't what, you know, I mean, there's lots of different accounts of you know, what was happening behind the scenes and ultimately what happened. But I think he signed up because he genuinely liked the idea of playing the Doctor, and he seems to be really enjoying playing the Doctor again. But I think there's probably more complicated things that happened during the recording of the series.
But it was a good catch for them, though, because he was a name, and you can understand why having him, even though he stayed only just for the one season, why having him there for the launch of this series was probably quite important. I mean, if I'm correct, had it leaked before Rose aired?
No, it went in the papers after the week after Rose, so it
That's
was
right.
known before the second episode that he wasn't going to be there for the whole thing. But it didn't go out. I mean, it was a bad timing, really. But it wasn't the scheme that actually, if he had decided he was going to do another year, that we'd have not had Billy for next year because she'd have been killed at the end of the series. As the sort of that would have been the end there. That was the notion. Because he dead, you wouldn't get rid of both, and you know.
Because I hadn't they wanted to cast David Tennant though originally, but he wasn't available. I thought that he was in the frame.
Don't think that's true, is it? I don't think that's
here we
true,
go.
my love. I think is that from the dark web, my lover.
First
I don't think that's
weekend.
true. I think Mr. Eccleston was a good launch name for that because no one had heard of that David Tennant until he'd done Casanova, had they?
Oh, I love the fact that Dark Web's with us for the new season.
No, honestly, that's what
And I think they originally, it wasn't the Autons that were going to be. It was going to be. They come from the was it the Quarks that were going to be?
No,
around?
it wouldn't have been, would it?
I think the Quarks were going to be smashing out the shop windows, going.
I'm glad to see nothing has changed.
We might have had a break. We might have had our interval of between seasons, but we're back with a bang.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is interesting because I suppose because I mean like the first or two I can probably remember watching, jokes aside, as a little me was Time in the Rani, and so it's only realistically the TV movie and then Rose onwards I can remember watching as an adult, or approaching adult, that's got sort of semblance of what's happening around it, if that makes sense. And I think context is quite a big thing sometimes when you watch these things, and I think it's really hard to I'm going to get the words right. It's hard to estimate in some ways how big a deal it was launched on, because Doctor Who by 2005 was something that was a bit kind of like, people would know a Doctor Who fan, but you wouldn't go into a shop and it wasn't a thing. You'd have the odd bit of merchandise that you get for a strange relative that had the VHS or something like that. It wasn't a mainstream thing that everyone would be like, yeah, I'm watching Doctor Who on a Saturday night, but I'm watching Doctor Who on my VHS that I've taped off Vigo Gold. It was a different world going into this. If you'd have said to someone the week before Rose went out, I'm a Doctor Who fan, this is my Doctor Who t-shirt, I'm going to be dressing up as Tom Baker today, you would have been like, yeah, good on you, mate. Now, if I dress up as Tom Baker, I dressed up as Sylvester McCoy, went shopping the other week. People don't care. It's perhaps they just want to keep away anyway. But I think it's a different world where it's suddenly the geek or the sci-fi thing is very much a mainstream thing, and it's a big thing, and it wasn't. I mean, you had your X-Files and you have other franchises, but for Doctor Who was not cool for this point. Nobody was feeling that.
And it wasn't, and it became popular culture literally I feel like it was literally overnight, because you ended up within a year, you ended up with the back wall of Toys R Us absolutely covered in Doctor Who merchandise, the likes of which we'd not even seen back in the original classic days. So all of a sudden, because it was back on primetime television on a Saturday night, 13 weeks of the year, it all of a sudden resonated with a new audience plus an old audience, and the whole lot coming together with the name and the sort of fresh outlook with the concept and everything else just clicked. And that end of that first year, you can understand why I think it's still running today, because whatever they had, whatever magic dust they sprinkled in the pot that time when they came up with the idea to come back and do this again and revisit it, and that was a brave idea to pitch that concept to the BBC. Must have been a brave idea, but whatever happened, it worked and it was successful, and we benefit from that today. And you're right, overnight it became almost fashionable to be geek again.
Almost.
It was another year before it became fashionable to have Converse. Yeah, so the only sort of guest star in this is Mark Benton, isn't he? And he has a
Poor old Clive.
Poor Clive has a bit of a subplot, doesn't he? Via some terrible Photoshop pictures of Doctor Who over the years. I
Yeah,
always love it
right.
when you get those shows.
They're all Christopher Eccleston, aren't they?
Yes.
This is the weird thing.
Nowadays, you'd have one that was Richard Hurndall just to mix it all up. William Hurndall. No, Richard Hurndall. I'm getting my Hurndalls, getting my gunfighters and my Five Doctors in my head now. There are.
But then again, it's quite a clever bit of writing because you get a bit of the Doctor's backstory, but again, not through the Doctor, through Rose finding this, weird internet guy who's got all these weird pictures of him. So you, as a new audience member, if you don't know much about the Doctor at all, you've got this guy explaining about how he's, this figure that's throughout history wherever there's a disaster, which is a really good way of setting up how a lot of the Doctor Who stories go. And then later you've got sort of more about the Doctor through Mickey finding stuff online. It's a very modern way of doing it, because back in the day you wouldn't really have had that ability to sort of look up the Doctor. So I think that's quite clever. I think it's sad that he gets bumped off by the Autons, but at least he's memorable in this episode, even if he just gets killed off.
Well, I think is that the first example we have, because we get, and I won't preempt any other. It's the first example of what is essentially a supporting or minor character that you get enough of a brush of what they're about, that when they do get killed, you go, oh, and you have a reaction, which is what I think we've consistently said with recent era episodes is the problem, that you could have a lead character who gets butchered at the end, and you're like,
doesn't matter.
Not bothered. Whereas this, you've seen his family set up, you've seen where he's at, you've seen that he's sort of into this thing, and he's in some ways he's being into that is what sort of leads to the knowing what's going to happen and then dying, and it's all quite played out. The other there's two regulars here, aren't we? Noel, I'm not sure where he's pitching. I mean, he does say that he does think he did a bad job on season 1. In truth, but he is a bit bigger than it needs to be. He's coming at it at 120, and he's sort of bringing it down to 60. It's a bit much, I think. And it's I did have that kind of cringe inside at that scene where he's been autoned up in the restaurant, and she doesn't notice. And he's just going, pizza, and all that stuff. It's like, oh gosh. I know, again, and it comes down to that pitching at different audiences, and I suspect, I don't remember being as upset about it when I was younger, and I suspect if you were younger still, and you were 6 or 7, you'd be like, he's an alien and she's not noticed, and that's fine. It's probably pitching levels and stuff like that, but it does feel a little bit CBBC.
And I think there was an element there as well, not just that Auton bit where he's made up that way, but I think I think I alluded to this a little bit earlier. There just some of the elements were just a little bit comic-y or a bit sort of I'll use the word childish for now, just for the purpose of this. But you've got that whole thing with the wheelie bin, and whilst it's a common everyday thing, the whole thing with this whole stretching and then in and burping and all that sort of thing, I don't know. It didn't sit well originally, but I can see it in the context of why they were trying to do it, because they're appealing to all ages, I think.
But I think what you get is when, at the end, when the Doctor says to Rose, do you want to stay here, eat chips and, put up with this, or do you want to come on an adventure? You kind of, I think the Mickey's character in this is quite poor, and so you can understand why she would go, yeah, let's go. I mean, she loses her job because the building blows up, and he's like, oh, let's go down the pub and watch the football, and you can see why. You can see why at the sight of someone who's offering adventure and excitement, she would turn around and say, actually, I'm off. Because it's kind of this.
He's not rock and roll, is he? He's not presented as rock and roll.
It's not.
But is that sort of also in some ways a representation that the Doctor's manipulative and Rose is a little bit selfish? I think those two are also character traits that aren't shied away from, are they, in honesty? Because Rose does bugger off into space and time and doesn't think that there's a consequence for her boyfriend or for her mother, which is something we'll come on to later. But Doctor Who has wangled the gold stick at her, said, and she does realise, a week on, that that's a bit alarming that he has manipulated her in that way so quickly. I can remember actually going to the Doctor exhibition on Brighton Pier, and there's a picture of me as a 24-year-old with an eating disorder lifting up the bin lid. My little stick arms, I'm not eating. That was an actual featured exhibit, the wheelie bin from Rose.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Back end of the pier, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think was the episode playing inside the bin or something like that? Yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah. See, again, that was the thing. These things, it was like you can have a big exhibition in where people would go, and it wasn't just Doctor Who fans shuffling around their way to the cheap targets in the shop. It was an actual people walking by, going in and saying, "I've seen Doctor Who on a Saturday night. Let's look at the costumes." Yeah. So, and then the other regular who you are all not allowed to say anything unpleasant about is Camille.
Oh, we would never want to say anything unpleasant about Camille. Never.
I think, again, she's a character that we'll come back to as we go through this series and future ones. I think there is a wonderful, just down to earthness about her that she, particularly later on in this series, and I so want to jump ahead to other stories, and I'm like, no, stay on this one. In this, this, it's just when she gets caught up with the autumn invasion, she's just out shopping. She's like, gotta go shopping, and he's being chased by a load of autons in wedding dresses. And just think that's brilliant.
But she also has the lovely bit where she's like, on the phone. She's always on the phone, and about getting the compensation for the job, and she is, as soon as Rose goes out, she's on the phone, and the character quite quick. Well, actually, no, that's unfair. I think the superficiality of the character straight away, and the joy of it actually is that you see her grow as the series, and you see that she's actually very strong, and she is, massive.
And it's a brilliant casting choice up against Billy, because they work very, very well together, and you can see them as that sort of family unit. And actually, I think the decision to bring a family connection into the series was again another one of those fresh ideas that initially I was hesitant about, but actually in hindsight it's probably the right thing. I think again it's been probably a little bit overplayed in future series to come, but at this point giving it that twist of having that sort of whole family unit at play already, and the Doctor sort of almost crashing into their lives, I think works really well. And Camille, honestly, you just got it. I mean, she just makes me laugh just with some of the facial expressions, and just it's perfect casting.
I think it shows consequence, doesn't it? I think with the setup of the family unit and in subsequent Doctors as well, with new companions, it sets up the consequences of traveling with the Doctor, because when they come home, there's that interaction of you've changed, or this has happened, or the family potentially being put at risk because of their association with the Doctor. So I think it's an interesting addition. I mean, we had Aunt Vanessa, but that was literally just like, the first time she met the Master.
We had Perry's stepdad, didn't we, as well?
Yeah.
Which you only liked for the shorts, didn't you? Let's be fair. Remember the shallow old Marys on that episode?
That might have added a point or two to the story, as I recall.
we haven't sort of done the family unit before in that way, and it always it brings it's a really good thing about bringing it back to contemporary Earth, because that's where the family is. So there's always, we were popping by from our space adventures or our, being back in time. So I think that's a really good thing. And of course there are twists to that as we go through this.
And had I watched Canine and Company back in the day, I'd have been used to it already, wouldn't I?
Well, you would have, had you watched it.
I mean, Ace obviously has the storyline about her mum, but you don't. You do meet her mum, I suppose, but not in a dramatic sense of her having a scene where she's having an argument with her mum and walks out or makes her time storm in the. So it's not something Doctor Who's gone to previously. But I suppose is that in some ways the shift of a modern drama, that's how you'd expect a character to if you were taking a companion from modern life, you'd expect them to have some sort of backstory and a life and and yeah, interestingly, it's something that was let go of as things rolled on, and maybe that is again the lodestones that works with Russell's era, is that Martha and Donna both have very strong family. Reggie Yates aside, who obviously he had a week and didn't want to come back.
I actually just thought you said Eddie Yates then for a minute.
Eddie Yates was Martha's brother. I mean, I'm not sure how we're getting that to work, but yeah, I can see that. Yeah, so it's kind of it's something that's sort of like, because Amy Pond's parents are basically, no offense to anybody, but they just appear at the wedding, don't they? They don't really get involved with it. Clara, who knows Clara anymore? She has her nan, doesn't she? So it's kind of, I just think it's something that's progressively just ditched. And even when the new series with Yasmin goes back to her family, they don't particularly make much of it. They sort of nod to it. Yeah, her sister is in about 4 episodes, but you don't really know anything other than the fact that she'll play a video game with her. There's no. If the angel had come out the screen and killed Yasmin's sister, you wouldn't have been like, oh my god, what's happened here? Whereas, come Doomsday, I was actively like, kill Rose, not Jackie. So I don't. It is an important heart of it, I think, and because people have families and they have those associations and those relationships, and I think it's quite key to how this plays out as it goes on.
Yes.
So, other than announcing that Rose is the highest rated episode since The Creature in the Pit, do we have any other facts that we would like to share with the nation?
10.8 million people tuned in to watch it.
Phenomenal. Yeah. When you think about that is phenomenal. That for an opening episode of a series that, let's face it, we didn't think we'd ever see come back once the series had gone off air and we'd had, McGann and what have you. 10.8 million for a BBC One Saturday night program. Brilliant stuff.
There's a few things. I mean, because it is the first episode of the revival, there's lots of new first things. So it's the first, in fact, it's the only story in 4 seasons that starts with the actual titles and doesn't have a prelude going into the episode, because it just goes straight into it. All the others have got a little bit at the beginning. You get the first mention of the Shadow Proclamation as well in this episode. The Time War. They talk about a war, but they don't actually mention the Time War until a bit later on. Jason's doing some sort of weird mime. On dummy or
no, I'm just ticking things off. I'm ticking the facts off my list here.
Do you want to add any, or shall I?
No, I'm happy for you to do them.
And then obviously it's the first Next Time trailer as well in this season. That's become the sort of regular thing.
Because the Next Time trailers were added because the episode wasn't long enough. It wasn't a purposeful sort of editorial. Let's get them reeled in. It was like, crikey, we haven't got enough material here. Let's bang in a next time, and it worked. But didn't they remove it from some releases? There was kind of, I'm sure some of the
So
DVDs didn't.
there was, I think, one of the cliffhangers they didn't do a next time.
Oh no, when it comes to Boomtown, not Boomtown, when it comes to World War Three, that one.
Yeah,
They did it at the end of the credits. So you had the cliffhanger, then the credits, and then the next time after, I think. Was that the gist, as I remember? Or did they do it wrong the first time, then made it right when it got to the empty child? Because I remember people saying you had the cliffhanger and then you had the next time, which revealed that the cliffhanger was resolved. So maybe I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying? Because if it's a two-part story and you end with someone being shot and the next time says they're not shot, then it's a little bit of a ruin.
Sometimes the next time trailer came at the end of the credits, so you sort of got a few minutes of just like, oh, they're in danger, and then I think the one where David Tennant regenerated, where the fake regeneration, they didn't do a next time trailer for that one. I think there was a couple of times they were clever and just went, no, we're not going to give you a next time.
I'm sure they still did a post credits one, but didn't put him in it or something. I think it was very much the vibe. I could be wrong. I think they must have got it wrong the first time. I'm sure there must have been complaints because, I mean, Doctor Who fans, heaven forbid that they should complain about anything. I think that happened after Aliens in London, that you had hit the electrocution and all that stuff. And then the next time it showed that everybody was all right. And then the end credits. So I think then when it came to doing The Empty Child, they had the end credits and then next time on Doctor Who.
Yes. Yeah, there definitely is a next time because I've just watched that episode. You were saying about the nesting conscience. Weirdly, Nick Briggs is credited as the voice of the nesting conscience.
He grunts. He doesn't speak. He grunts.
So yeah, that was what I had on my pad.
Still a royalty payment,
and not a quark in sight.
Did I miss anything, Jason? I saw you going for a checklist. Did I miss anything?
No, you're okay. I think you covered most of the main ones there.
Oh, did I? Good.
So let's have. I've run out of tea, but let's have a summary and some scores on Doctor Who and Rose.
You've got time to go and put the kettle on now.
Okay, I'll go first then. And this is this for me is a great start to what will be the Doctor Who journey for many years to come. I like the freshness of the series already. I was sort of, I like this. This feels right. The fact that they didn't throw out all of the elements and kept certain things and some of the iconic stuff that I think needed to be kept was the right decision. And artistically and from a production perspective, I think there was ambition and 10.8 million viewers on its opening episode sums it up for me. Chris Eccleston, I think, great choice for the Doctor, and I'm going to enjoy reviewing the remaining episodes of this season as we go through this. I think great casting, putting it on present day Earth to start the series off again. Quite the right decision. So lots of positives for the opener, but there's some way to go this season yet. So I'm going to be coming in here with actually it's quite interesting. I don't know whether I should go down the Shirley Ballas route of scoring here and just score it completely incorrectly, but I'm resetting my scores here for this season, and I'm going to start us off with a very solid 7 for Rose to get us going with.
Oh. That was
Jason's in heaven. He scored it 7.
Hey!
And by heaven, I mean paradise, not the like. Lurking at the bar with a pint. Don't mean that.
Oh no.
Does Prince Charles have a score and a summary for us? King Charles. I keep forgetting. She's gone, isn't she? King Charles.
Oh.
Bless her.
Yeah, do you know what? really enjoyed watching this back. And I think the last time I watched this was 2 years ago when it was the 15th anniversary of the show coming back. And I think it was during lockdown and there was some sort of watch along Twitter thing. So it's not been that long ago since I saw this. And I am a big Eccleston fan. And I'm a big Billy fan, and I think they work really well together in this. And I love the the setting up of the family unit. I think, P-Bal, you're right. I think the rest of the story is kind of immaterial. I think it's, the Autons are there, and as a classic Who fan, it's like, great, yeah, love the Autons, but they don't really add anything because you're just building up the audience, knowledge around the Doctor and the main characters. As a season opener, it is good. It is good fun. The humour in some places is all right, in other places less so. And as much as I normally like to add half or take off half, I am in complete agreement with my wavy-armed friend with a 7. Oh, look at the shock on his face. You can't see it, dear viewer.
I thought he'd sat on something, to be honest.
I thought someone was in front of him with a biscuit and he was just like...
No, I was definitely doing a shocked face there. That's true. So, what are you pointing at me now? We can't see it.
Oh, well, you can't see it because I see. Look,
oh, you writ a 7 down. Oh.
It was a 7.
Oh, that's very exciting. Yeah, I do the other thing. I really love that shot when they run, and it took them ages to do it when they run across with the bus. That's a nice moment, isn't it? And Murray Gold's music, whilst a little bit loud in the mix, is at the point where it's actually, hey, this is good. There's some noticeable, lovely themes here. Before it becomes, oh crikey, Murray, tone it down. I'd agree. I think it's a great pilot. It's a great launch of the show. I think it's a perfect relaunch of the show, but I'm not doing like a Jason. It's a perfect thing. It's the pinnacle of the series. It's a 2. What I would say is it's a really good relaunch for the show. But in terms of actually a Doctor Who story and how I feel about it, it's obviously not a bona fide sort of classic. So I came down on a 6.
Okay.
Which it's above average. It's fine. It's lovely. It's functional. It does what it needs to do, and it's great. But it's not a classic, is it? In the grand scheme of things.
No, it's a good opener. I'm some way off using peak or pinnacle, I believe, in this season yet, though.
Please don't try and pretend that they have any relevance to the scoring.
They don't at all.
It's a pinnacle and it's a 5 from me.
It wouldn't be like you to peak too soon.
That's what the face was, wasn't it?
No, that's just rude, James. No.
Jason's peaking too soon face. Right. Well, thank you very much. That was part 1. We're going to go, because they're so long. Really got, there's only so much you want to listen to us talking our ways. So that is week 1, where Doctor Who and the Rose has ended on 20 points. Is it a season winner? Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Pleasure to be back.
Yes, it is indeed a pleasure to be back.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, write comments beneath. If you can write something pithy and unpleasant about me, I'll even respond to you if you don't want to respond back. See you in the next video.